What is going on, guys? It's your boy BG, and welcome to Common Sense, where common sense is so common. And today, I have a special guest, Mawusi Bridges, and later on down the line, I will have another special guest that's very similar to herself. I'm not going to really give in too much into like the introduction of her. I want you guys to give a little bit of a feel for her and let her kind of like explain her introduction, where she's from and whatnot.
Excellent. Thanks, Braxton. So I'm Mawusi Bridges. I live in Washington, D.C. A little bit about myself. I grew up around the area, primarily in Virginia, with my family. Graduated from UVA about 5 years. 6 years ago now. My God, the time. 6 years ago.
Time flies.
Yeah, it really does. I'm like, hey. And then been living in DC ever since. Currently working full time, but really, been working toward, taking the leap into entrepreneurship, right? Some of the things I want to do in my life is, have that impact on my community through not only like philanthropy and like setting up resource programs for, underprivileged families in the area, but also like through housing, through schools and, helping the children get the confidence and maintaining that confidence, through the rest of their lives. That's a little bit about myself, what I'm looking forward to doing in my lifetime.
I almost forgot what question I was going to ask for a second because I had to sit here and let my brain recuperate for a quick moment. Because before we really get into the topic, before we actually like bounce into it, today's topic we'll be talking about vulnerability and how it can also be a strength for you instead of a weakness. Because I feel like in society, people place vulnerability as a weakness, and that could be being vulnerable to multiple things, especially within the occupation that you do. Is say, for example, for someone who does something in music, or for someone who's that vulnerability, like say you want to do production or something like that, producing music and stuff like that, if they aren't vulnerable or aren't open to allowing themselves to understand and have a brain open-minded about different types of beats and different types of instrumentals, it limits themselves as a producer. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's like study, absorb all the knowledge that you can to build like your own niche, and be willing to take that criticism, right? Like for anyone, anytime you put yourself out there, whether it's like, oh, I'm going to put my music out, I'm going to put, my writing out, I'm going to put myself out there, go to a new event or whatever, right? That's an act of vulnerability, right? There's small things from just asking for help, or like big things like publishing a book or something like that, right? The scale of vulnerability is almost everything that we it's almost like everything that we do. Anytime we step into something new, that's an act of courage, because you never know. There's always that uncertainty there of what's really going to happen at the end of it. Yeah, I like how you said, to your point about society viewing vulnerability as like a weakness, right? That's one of the myths. I read in this book, Daring Greatly, by Brene Brown, and she's like, I think the first myth was, vulnerability is a weakness, but really it's probably one of the strongest things you could do, right? Putting yourself out there, saying what you need to say, speaking up for yourself. Even something as simple as is someone saying no, right? Oh, do you want an egg and cheese sandwich? And it's like, no, I don't actually like eggs, and you keep asking me every time we go out to breakfast. And I say yes because I was trying to console your feelings, but really it's more of like, wait, I really just don't like this, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's a strength, it's an act of courage, in my opinion, as well. Like just being able to ask for help is probably one of the biggest things, every single person needs to know and to do.
Right. I 100% agree, honestly, because I feel like reason why people feel like vulnerability is such a weakness because as for one, personal experiences. That's for one. That is like people went through personal experiences, whereas they were vulnerable to someone and they that person misused their vulnerability. I feel
Yeah.
like personal experiences is what made people think that, man, vulnerability is such a weakness,
Yeah.
especially things on Instagram like these memes and these little posters about talking about vulnerability. I mean, you have the good posters, but you have the bad posters, and I feel like, especially I have a personal Instagram page, so I definitely follow some, people that definitely post vulnerability, but in a negative aspect. And on my Common Sense podcast page, I hear a lot about vulnerability in a positive aspect. And yeah, I feel like people feel that way about vulnerability because they probably been through relationships and people misuse their vulnerability and being open, or when someone asks for them to be vulnerable and they become vulnerable, but they don't know how to take
Respond to that
care,
person.
respond to that vulnerability. I forgot, I don't know why it related to this song I was listening to by Blast. And I think it was called Mood or something. I don't know if it was called Mood or it was called, I gotta remember the exact song. I don't know what song is it. I don't know what song is it. By the way, Blast is fire. If y'all ever get a chance to listen, Blast is lit. Blast is lit. But he had a song, I think it was called Falling. Yes, it was called Falling. And he had something like, if I gave you my heart, if I gave you my heart and you drop it, that's a wrap. And I think that's a form of vulnerability. And that's what a lot of people feel. If I gave my person my heart and they misuse it, giving someone your heart is giving someone your vulnerability. And if that person drops that vulnerability, it's a wrap. That's it. You done damaged it. And I feel like that's why a lot of people feel like vulnerability is such a weakness. I don't even know why that came into my head, because I think I was listening to Blast before this podcast. I think I was listening to Blast before this podcast, but in reality, really, vulnerability is your greatest strength, because if you aren't vulnerable to anything, there isn't any room for growth. If you aren't vulnerable to situations, there isn't any way for you to learn how to react to the situation again when you step into that particular problem or that particular brick wall again. And yeah, just a lot of people just mistreat that. And I feel like just me being vulnerable to podcasts is what allowed me to be open-minded about creating my own podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a part of vulnerability, because Quincy put me onto it. He was like, yo, bro, I said, I'm not sure if you're really into podcasts, but you should listen to this podcast by Jay Shetty with Big Sean in it. And at the time,
I heard that was a good one.
What? That was literally the best one. I feel like it was the best one because Big Sean, I relate to Big Sean in so many scales, because for one, he watched anime. So I'm a guy that watch anime. So I immediately connect with him on that level. And then he was like, man, I watch Star Wars. I was like, I don't really mess with Star Trek. I mess a little bit with Star Wars. I don't really mess with Star Trek like that. But the Jay Shetty podcast is what opened me up to actually wanting to do podcasts more, because I feel like it helped me to understand that I have a good way of talking, a good way of speaking, a good way of speaking my mind if I'm in the moment, And I think a lot of times being in the moment and able to enjoy that moment allows you to be comfortable in being yourself in that particular moment. And that's also becoming vulnerable to that moment.
Yes, and being present.
Damn, that actually sounded fire. I didn't even expect, I didn't even expect it to come out like that.
Yeah.
I didn't even expect it to come out like that, but it just came out smooth like that. I always amaze myself when I say something like that. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I ain't trying to sound like I'm real cocky or anything like that, but it's just that it's just something about that. But it's just like, that's what I mean. I feel like that's a talent within itself. Just being able to know what to say in that moment. I feel like that's a gift within itself. Just doing that and just being able to speak in that manner will help me influence other people. And this is why I took consideration into like, okay, let me just do this podcast. I feel like that was always something I wanted to do. And, enough about myself. What was something back then, before the way you thought of vulnerability, what was your thoughts about vulnerability back then compared to how it is, what your thought of it is now?
I guess like growing up, or more so maybe like I'll say high school, college, when I like gave more conscious thought to my emotions or whatever. That sounds weird, but right.
I mean, hey, it is what it is. I mean, the space is yours, real. The floor is yours.
It's like, how did I think back then? I guess I don't think I would necessarily use or what do you call that? Like, I knew what vulnerability was. I knew what being vulnerable was. And I would always think of it as, oh, someone's like, oh, I was so vulnerable. It's like they talked about like something negative that happened and they expressed, how they felt towards that. But and I never really realized, I was like, oh, you're being vulnerable if you share, your quote unquote negative emotions, like
So it's
your
like
sadness, your feeling, you're sharing like your feeling, I guess.
so so I
but
guess
not like the
so
positive feelings, right? Of like, your
oh
happiness. I didn't think of happiness as quote unquote vulnerability. It was just like, yeah, you're just
oh
expressing your emotions and feelings,
you
right?
never so you never really thought of that thing. You never really thought of vulnerability as a positive or negative aspect or you never really like vulnerability never came into your head at the time, basically what you're saying. If
No,
that makes sense. It's
I
like
wouldn't say never. I think it was more of I had individual, you think of it as like the individual acts of like, oh, that person, someone asking for help. That's exactly what they did. They asked for help. Someone crying, that's what they did. They were crying, right? Someone expressing joy and dancing around, oh, that's what they did, dancing, joy, happiness, right? But I didn't think of like kind of all those things are kind of all all of those acts are under that like bigger umbrella of what vulnerability is, right?
mm,
Like so I never really like used the word vulnerable all the time to like describe people's mine or others behaviors or emotions or anything like that. That makes sense. So like it's not like it wasn't there or that I never thought about it. It was just I just described it for the emotion that because the emotion had a word.
okay, so you
Yeah,
thought vulnerability more so as an emotion than it is like a it's like I get what you're
it
saying. It's like
right.
I sort of I don't really know how to
Yeah,
explain. I kind of understand what you're saying in a way. I
yeah.
just don't
Of
know how
like,
to say it the way you're trying to
well,
say it. Like
well. How about you? Did you ever really think of like growing up or until recently? Did you ever really use the word vulnerable or vulnerability as of what it is or describing anything?
honestly, I never really, you know what? That is a hell of a question. Because now
Right.
because now when I think about it, no, I think back then I never really looked at vulnerability as like
Mm-hmm.
as anything. I never really looked at it as an emotion. I never I looked at it, I guess I use vulnerability as a different word as using open. So I always thought of open, not vulnerability.
Yes,
You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
Yes. And that's
Yeah, I
exactly how
never
I was thinking of like,
right,
oh, you're
right.
just
I
really expressing yourself and whatever that
right,
means.
right. I thought
Like
of
you're
it just
willing to
being open.
share. Yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah, I
yeah.
thought it was just being open, but I never really looked at it as okay, it's the word vulnerability. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think for me at the time, vulnerability never skimmed across my head. I never even thought of the word vulnerability. I don't even think that shit
Right?
was even in my goddamn vocabulary.
No,
I ain't
it's
even gonna
super.
lie. I
It's
don't
so
even
funny.
think it was in
It's
my vocabulary, yo. I
it's
ain't even
funny.
looked at it, but I never
See,
even
and
looked
like
at
for me, it's
vulnerability as
like,
even a word that existed.
yeah, for me, it's like I knew the word, knew what it was, knew like mostly what it meant, or knew what it is in context. But it wasn't. I never really like thought of it as a full concept until I read or heard about Brene Brown, and read her book, The Daring Greatly. And then she does it because she's a shame researcher. So
Mm,
she like has done a lot of research on like shame and vulnerability, in men and women and what that looks like. And so like reading that book really it put a scope around it, a scope around, sometimes those internal feelings that those feelings you feel inside, but you're not necessarily, you either could be like trying to suppress quote negative emotions, or you feel the joy, you feel the happiness, whatever the range of whatever it is, or if you ever feel those moments of shame, or you not maybe not recently, but at any point in life, right, where you felt emotionally exposed and things like that. Like did a really good job of putting those type of things into like I guess into the scope of vulnerability and shame.
I
So like
guess, like you mean like in a new perspective of
yeah,
looking at
like
vulnerability.
a new perspective, or it's like, oh, because she's like, oh, vulnerability is all of these things of like a vulnerability is telling someone I lost my job. Vulnerability is asking someone for help. Vulnerability is saying no. What else? Vulnerability
I,
is putting my work on a blog, on the website. Vulnerability is, posting a picture on Instagram type things, right? But I
mm,
think the definition she uses specifically for that word vulnerability is what was it? She describes as uncertainty risk and emotional exposure, kind of like that feeling you get when you step outside your comfort zone, or you do something new,
Right,
and you're like
right.
loosening up the control you have over how others might perceive what you are doing or did, right? So getting out of
Right.
that comfort zone, doing something new, that's always
I feel like,
it's always like, ooh, wow, I did that. And it's like, you just have that like one. Sometimes it's just like a quick fleeting second of like, ooh, should I do it? And then you press send, and then what did you do? You're like, oh, wow, good job. Like,
it's
you
so it's
did
like being
it.
vulnerable. So it's almost in a way being vulnerable is like the mystery of what the outcome could be if you have done that.
Yes, yeah, right, yeah. Especially if it's like, yes, that's pretty much what it is. Like, oh, how are others going to perceive what I'm doing? Because whether we shouldn't give so much weight to what other people think, but at the same time, everyone cares what someone in their life thinks.
Right, right. And I
People
feel
will
like
think
it's
whatever they feel, but you need to choose whose opinion you value, right? Because otherwise, what do you
oh
do when people like she gave I don't know if I watched one of her TED talk, and she had talked about when she did her first TED talk. Everything she thought she was gonna say, like threw it out the window and was like super exposed herself of like, wow, these are the moments when I wasn't feeling the best, but this is how I worked through it, but etc. And afterwards, she had like this quote unquote like fogginess, or like like an emotional hangover. And she was like, wow, did I really just post all that? And then she didn't know it was gonna go on YouTube. And then all these people were watching it. People loved it. It was a really good one. Like millions of views really fast. But then also, what did she do? She went and looked at the comments, right? And she looked at the comments, of course, great things that were being said, but also there's always people who are being negative
I feel like, yo, if
towards
you're
anything. And she was like, wow, the first thing I read all of those, even though my husband said not to read the comments, she did. Then she got like, when people are saying negative things, what do? You kind of get sad. You kind of go within yourself. You binge Netflix and eat ice cream. And then she'd be like a day or two. And then she was like, wait, why am I giving so much of my energy or how I feel about myself to someone else, from people who you don't even know? One, right? So it's like you really have to, and for everyone, like whose opinion really matters after you put yourself out there, after you present new artwork to the world, or after you do whatever, after you put out a new podcast. Even it's like if someone says something negative about it, it doesn't really matter, because one, you might, especially if you don't know them. But even if you do know them, it's one of your friends says something negative, then it's like, well, I'm glad I did what I did, right? The act, the act of me putting my work out there is what's courageous, and I'm happy that I put the work out there. But the value of myself and the value of who I am isn't tied to what other people think about it. It's more so like, am I doing what I set out to do? And I set out to put my work out there, and I did it. So, and I'm proud of it, right? I'm proud of it. There's probably still other people who are proud of it, but I'm not going to put the value in how I see myself and what people might say about it to an extent. So,
that's
or at
real.
least check myself if I do that. I'm like,
Yeah,
wait.
yeah, that's real. Because while you were saying that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think to an extent, everyone wants to be vulnerable to someone to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I think that's a part of human nature too, to be vulnerable, and it's also part of human nature to be somewhat to an extent paranoid, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like when we was talking a while back, when we was on a Zoom call, and yeah, I feel like paranoia is there. Well, I mean, there's such thing as too much vulnerability, and we just want to retract back this again, because I feel like to some people may feel the same as I feel, some people may not. But when there's an extent to too much vulnerability, it's also closing your ears to comments that don't really matter. And as you said, opinion. You don't want to be too vulnerable to everyone's word. You don't want to be too vulnerable to everyone's opinion. You don't want to be too vulnerable to everyone's comment. You don't want to be too vulnerable to everyone's emotion. Because guess what? Each and every last one of those things I just named are a form of energy. Vulnerability is also taking pride in energy that you have, but also coming to a limit to prioritize. You have to prioritize that. Because if you're too open to everyone else's comments, that pulls the energy that you was open up yourself to, like the good energy that you have within yourself. You open up yourself to some negative energy that disrupts disrupts who you are, you know? And when you give into someone else's opinions, when you give into someone else's comments, when you give into someone else's emotions, you give it into someone else's lifestyle. You're giving into someone else's
Yeah.
mindset. You're giving into them. And whatever your energy is focused on, whatever you're focused on, that's what your energy goes towards. So I think that to an extent, yes, it's good to be vulnerable. No, not to an extent. It's good to be vulnerable. Let me correct that. It's good to be vulnerable, but it's also good to close your ears from time to time and be on guard to certain people where you have to close your vulnerability to.
Necessarily closing vulnerability.
Or I guess you would
I
say
think it's more of no.
limiting.
Like, I mean, I see what you're saying, but it's not. It sounds like you're saying. It sounds like, oh, in the way of, oh, it's too. You can be too vulnerable. You can share too much, or you can um
Nah, I wouldn't really
do
say it in
too
that
much.
aspect. I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't really say it in that aspect. It's like if I told you, okay, I think you're bad at blase, blase, blase.
Hmm.
If you're really open, you're going to listen to me. If you're
No,
limiting that
no,
opening, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like you don't
but
want to hear too much of what people saying.
no, I don't think
You
it's a
gotta,
case of being. Oh no, I agree about, yeah, pick and choose. Whose opinion you listen
yeah,
to,
that's
whose
limited. That's
opinion you
limited.
value to.
Yeah, that's
But I don't
limiting
think
your
that's.
vulnerability.
I
That's
don't
closing
think
your ears to
so,
certain.
because vulnerability
Really?
is kind of, yeah. I think it's just more of, because I feel like
Unless I'm
it's
rewording it wrong. Unless
taking.
I'm wording it in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we're thinking of like two different.
Cause I
We're
don't know.
naming things differently, because I
Cause
think it's like, okay, when you put yourself out there, when you share, you're building that level of trust between someone, right? Because what all humans want, we want that feeling of connection and belonging with someone else or with multiple people, in a community type. That it's just a human nature. We want to feel like we belong somewhere and that we can connect with other people. And the
mhm,
only way you can truly connect with someone else is through like that act of vulnerability, like, right, you're sharing emotions and experiences with other people, right, and it helps you build like that love and belonging, like encourage, you can have empathy, or you practice empathy. But so say, okay, so like, yeah, you share a lot with people, but then what happens, one person might misinterpret what you say, or they say something negative towards it, and then you're like, of course, correct me if I'm wrong. So if someone does that, and you said, what was the example you gave, then it's like, oh, you should close yourself off, because you say, oh, if you're open, you're gonna listen to that person's opinion, and it's like, no, not necessarily, right? You're not gonna, just because you're an open-minded person, just because you're willing to hear what someone else is saying, whether it's good or bad, I don't think you should change your behavior or how you feel or how expressive or open you are towards other people because of one person's opinion.
I got you. I get what
Yeah,
you're
if
saying.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's it kind of yeah. I can
Okay.
see where you're coming from. I don't well.
And
I
I
don't know
see
how
where
that.
you're
It's
coming
like
from too, because
I get it. What you're saying. I think we're saying the same thing, but I think we're saying it in like different
different ways.
ways.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Because
think
I
we're saying
remember
the
when
same
we
thing
talked
instead
about
of
it
saying
last
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think we're saying the same thing. It's just in different perspectives and different ways of
yeah,
saying it.
yeah. But I
Cause
don't
it's
think you can ever
like
be too vulnerable, because everything you do is you just
yeah.
sharing is
I mean,
like
yeah. I mean, every
technically
day
that
you
act.
honestly, personally, I feel like every day you're opening to something every day, whether it's a
Yeah,
conversation. Well,
exactly.
really, I think every moment you're opening yourself up to something, whether it's a conversation with your coworkers that you have no
Hmm.
idea about. It could be something that someone's putting you on to. It could be a show. It could be
Yeah.
music. It could be foods. It could be vulnerability. Don't always have to necessarily mean being emotionally vulnerable. I think
Hmm.
vulnerability have different levels, just like there are different levels of success.
A hundred,
Just
a hundred
like
percent. It's a huge
you're right.
spectrum.
Right. And I feel like just as much as success, you can be successful mentally, successful physically, meaning working out, meaning eating healthy. That's being successful physically. Being successful mentally could be meaning magic. Damn, I was about to say magication. I was about to say some shit. Edu,
Meditation.
edu, educating yourself, meaning reading books. Because I put my
Yes,
retainers back in, so now I'm over here stumbling over words. That could be
you're
meaning
good.
mentally educating yourself, that's being successful in that category. Learning new knowledge, that's in the mental category. Being successful as far as your love life, meaning it could be meaning your relationships, being successful in that area. Being successful also with wealth, being wealthy, having resources to continue obtaining more wealth. That could be mean being successful in that area too. I think it's just different levels of success, just like it's different levels of vulnerability. It could be mean
Yeah, 100%.
mentally vulnerable, what education you're open to, emotionally vulnerable, who you letting yourself being open to. Physically vulnerable could be meaning working out, what you're open to do as far as working out. Like I don't like doing squats. I'd rather do whatever exercise physically you could be being vulnerable too. Spiritually vulnerable is what you're allowing yourself to feed your soul as far as elevating your soul. You know what I'm saying? It could be mean prayer. It could be mean open to another religion. It could be mean being open to meditation, anything that can help you spiritually. I feel like there's different levels of vulnerability. There's many different levels. You know what I'm saying? Especially opening to different occupations, like being open to photography, being open to doing videography. It's just being open in different areas. You know what I'm saying? I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of people are exposed a lot being emotionally vulnerable. I think that's a huge exposure to a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people thinking vulnerability is being letting yourself out emotionally to other people. That's what society does a lot. That's what 90% of people would usually say. Being a vulnerable, you mean usually being emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah, and opening up, or but because it's like, I think the other side of it, right, is you feel why that word seems, I don't know, scary, or people think it's like a sign of weakness, is because we feel these things of like anxiety, fear, some shame towards, or uncertainty, right, just not knowing what's going to happen after I say or after I do this.
Right, right.
Like not knowing for certain what's really going to go on. And then like, what happens? People put up an armor, right? Like, what do they say? I heard, I don't know who said it, but public speaking is like the number one fear. I don't know if it was just America or whatever the survey said, but there's one guy, I was listening to this different podcast, and he was like, more people are afraid of public speaking than like dying. And what is it that happens is, public speaking is, just standing in front of a group of people and talking. And I mean, I'm not even about the front. Yeah, that's I'm
That shit
nervous as
true. That
heck.
shit true as
Yeah,
hell.
yeah.
That shit true as hell.
I was like,
Goddamn,
yeah,
I'd be
hell yeah.
scared.
I was like, I'd be nervous
If
to talk in front of
I feel
people.
like,
Even if I know exactly what I'm gonna say, I could be, I'm like, no, I'm an expert on this. And what is it? Before I go up there, before I get up there, I'm like, oh my God, this is scary. Like I have anxiety. I'm a little scared. Like I hope that went well. And then afterwards, I'm like, damn, I like it might have went well, but it's also like I'm second guessing myself. Like, did it go well? What are other people gonna think? Right. And I'm feeling like those, you feel those types of things when you speak in front of people.
I feel like in cases like that, right? Being afraid to be like talk. I feel like somewhere in deep in my head, I feel like I mean I can use myself as an example. Honestly, I feel
Yeah.
like just going up and just talking in front of a bunch of people. I feel like vulnerability, having that nervousness and having that anxiety to speak in front of people. It comes with like a factor of am I
Good enough.
comfortable in my own shell?
Well, I
You know
think
what I'm
a
saying?
little. Well, I think a little bit, but
It
sometimes.
comes with that too, because it's like when you're speaking in front of people, you're you letting out who you are. You know what I'm saying? Am
Mhm,
I comfortable in my own skin? Will people? It's like acceptance.
mhm.
Will people accept what I'm saying? As what you were saying earlier, like it's always everyone wants to be accepted in a certain crowd of people, and when you're speaking in front of a group of people, will these people accept what I'm saying here? Or it
Mhm.
comes also, it's so many things that runs in that factor of talking or like doing public speaking in front of people. Although I never
Mhm.
did it, never physically did it. But I think it's also, are you comfortable in your own skin? Are you able to show people who you are? And that retracts back to vulnerability. It's kind of crazy. It
Well,
does it at the end. It does
yeah.
retract
I
back
mean,
to
all of it,
vulnerability.
because it's an act of courage. Putting yourself. I mean, yeah, doing and saying whatever. It's I mean, yeah. like what you said, that is a piece of it, right? But I don't think
There's a piece of it.
people
I think it
are
plays.
nervous because they're not comfortable in their own skin. There's plenty of people who are completely comfortable in their own skin who still feel like, oh, this is a lot, getting in front of this many people is, oh, maybe I haven't done this many people, or maybe you have done it 2, 3 times, right? But it's still, you still have that moment of that uncertainty, right? And it might not necessarily be, oh, not, it might not be like questions of, will these people accept what I'm saying? It could be more so like, it's just like,
I feel
oh,
like
this
I
is
think
just
it's.
a,
I think
a reaction you feel before you do it. But yeah,
yeah.
you're not
I
wrong,
guess
because people still do that. I mean,
that's what I'm
it
saying.
could be that,
I
but
think
it
it
could
plays
also
a
be
lot of
other things,
factors.
right?
I think it's a lot
Yeah.
of factors. I think those will be in there and those factors too, because when
Mm-hmm.
you're nervous, I swear, it's so many thoughts running your head.
Yeah,
So many
yeah.
thoughts you didn't even think about that shit beforehand. It just when you're
Right?
in the moment, you're thinking about it right there, like right
Mm-hmm.
fucking there. When you're there, it comes in. But beforehand, it's
Mm-hmm.
not even there beforehand. But when you're in the moment, all because I guess when you have that, when you don't know what the outcome is, there's that chance of you'll have that negative energy coming in, and then you have that positive coming in, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
negative energy is because the thoughts creates the energy that your body would usually feel, or what your output would usually be. It's like if you think of a negative thought, and if you're not speaking it, your body is going to feel it.
Yeah. The body
Knows exactly what the brain is thinking. It follows exactly what the brain is thinking. So if you're thinking like, damn, like would these people accept what I'm saying? Boom, all of a sudden you're getting anxious, you're getting nervous. It's falling off that thought in your head. That emotion, the way you're feeling is that it follows off of that emotion that you're thinking in your head. Like the thoughts in your head, your body is going to feel that emotion. So now you're aware. Your body is aware of what your thoughts are thinking. So now you're getting nervous and anxious in that particular moment because of thoughts that you're thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, yeah.
I know it
Yeah,
sounds a little
like
confusing. It's like it's not, like I don't know how to say it. It's like when you think of a negative thought,
no, I mean, I
when
know
I
what you
trap
mean. Because it's like, yeah,
it,
if I'm like, oh, am I feeling this way? And then like if the body reacts in a physical manner.
your
Mm-hmm.
body in some cases is going to listen to what the mind is thinking. And when you have a negative thought, your body is going to have a negative reaction. It's cause and effect. Does that make sense? I think that's a little bit more better of saying. It's like a cause and effect.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's like in that particular moment, especially now, if you get a positive thought and you let that positive thought come to your head, then your body will react to that positive thought. Then you start
Mm-hmm.
to feel a little bit more comfortable. You know,
Yeah.
if you give yourself a prep talk ahead of time, or you give yourself a prep talk in the moment, your body will react to that thought that you're thinking, because the mind
Mm-hmm.
controls everything that you're going through at that particular moment. Your mind is steady processing that moment, that exact moment. Your brain is processing every second of that moment. So it's like what you're thinking, your body's going to react to it. If you have a negative thought, your body's going to retract with a negative reaction. Your body is like cause and effect. Your body's going to feel that negative vibe, that negative thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to feel your
Mm-hmm.
body's feeding off that thought. That makes more sense. Yeah, your body is feeding off that thought.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got you. I got what you're saying. Yeah.
Damn, it kind of like
I mean, it's just all.
it slid off a little bit off of vulnerability, but I mean, I know what you mean as far as like being, having anxiety, being anxious. But I feel like having anxiety, being anxious, it comes with that thought. That's the emotion comes with the thought. Your thoughts can translate into energy, and your
Oh
energy can
yeah,
be
yeah, for
translated into
sure.
emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, your thoughts translate into energy, and your energy is translated into your emotions. And your emotions is translated into your action. So it's like a whole step-by-step process. Before
Yeah,
you
but
actually
I
get
mean,
before you get that anxiety and that nervousness, first it comes with that mere thought.
yeah, it can for sure, for sure. I understand what you're saying, but to me, I mean, still, nonetheless, it's like those feelings, that uncertainty, that risk, that emotional exposure, is something everyone feels.
Yeah, everyone feels it.
And if you
I
say
even
you
feel
never
it.
feel it, yeah, if you say you never feel it,
That's a
you're
lie.
you're
That's a
lying.
goddamn lie. You're lying like
I was
shit.
like,
You
yeah, it's
even if you could be saying the truth, maybe you might not
no.
notice it.
If
You
you're
might not
no,
notice it. You might not recognize it. Like
it's
you know
literally
it.
like
Like it happened, but you just didn't like, you didn't
No,
look
no.
at it as being that.
If you don't feel those types of things, or like don't feel if you don't feel like any empathy, like no, you're lying. It's something
Motherfucker ain't
everyone
human.
feels. Literally, her research, she's like everyone feels it, and then like if you don't feel it, then like
You're not human.
that's a
Fuck
bigger
all
issue.
that.
Yeah, that's a bigger
Fuck all
issue.
that.
But
No, I'm saying
it's
like
like
some people may say, yeah, I never felt it before. They have, of course, I'm not saying you're wrong. They felt it
yeah,
before, but they never looked at it in that aspect. They never
mhm.
say, okay, I'm actually like scared or nervous, but they just try to just go through with the shit, even though they know they 100% feeling that fucking anxiety and that emotion.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
I mean, I know what you mean about the type of people who would lie, who would, but the
everybody
thing is,
goes
like,
through it. The point is,
everyone
everybody
goes
goes
through.
through
It's just
shit.
the point, yeah, it's a,
Everybody goes
it's
through
a
shit.
fact that
Everybody goes
everyone goes through that type. Vulnerability is something everyone experiences or has experienced. Like, it's just a simple fact.
Right, right, right.
But it's
So
like, part of all of this is right. It's really just being your authentic self. I think that's what it comes down to, is being your authentic self, which is like you allow yourself to feel or express a wide range of emotion. You allow yourself to feel joy without thinking, oh my God, I've had a great month. And then instead of thinking like, try to forebode it of being like, oh my God, I've had a great month, but this just means that something bad is going to happen. Right. I've seen so many people say stuff like that where they're like, oh my God, things have been going great, but I'm sure something bad's on the horizon. It is like, why would you, why would
why
you
would you
think
think
that?
that? And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That's the
But it's
thought.
like
That's
what
the thought.
everyone starts
That's
to
the
feel
thought of
that
this
way,
shit.
right? Well, not everyone, but a lot of people start to feel that way. But like I think all of this comes down to is like trying to be your most authentic self. And when you do feel those feelings of emotional exposure, or you feel like, oh, am I good enough? Right? You counteract it with something different, or you try, or you just do it. You just do. Oh, you just do it. Right? Like back to public speaking. You are super prepared. You feel great. You feel great the whole time. But then when they're introducing you, and those heart palpitations, your heart's beating fast.
Your
You
heart
take a
get to
moment, take
stuttering
a
like
breath, and
hell.
then you're like, go. And then you go, and then you're like, oh, perfect, I'm done, and I did it. Right. But there will
Yeah, I
be that
felt.
feeling, that feeling, sorry, that feeling, or that fleeting moment of like, whoo, what's about to happen?
Whew, shit, that shit is
How is
over
this
with.
gonna
God damn it.
go? And then you still do it. And I don't think it determines, I don't think I don't think because you had that moment of, well, what's going to happen when I go out there, because you ask yourself that question, or that question comes up. I don't think that necessarily correlates someone being able to say, oh wow, well, you didn't feel comfortable about yourself or what you were going to say. I think it was just like, what, I'm supposed to speak in front of 10,000 people. This is
I
big
mean, I ain't gonna lie,
regardless.
that
Oh,
shit
I'm
was
about
as
to speak in
hell. It
front of
just,
5 people. Even if I'm speaking in front of 2 people, right? Oh, I'm just gonna, that moment's gonna come, but it's really all about how you react to that moment. What do you do? Now, it would be different if
uh,
you felt that moment and then you're like, oh, I'm not going up there. Then that could become, yeah, then that could become a question of like, wait, do you feel like you're not prepared? Are you, talking yourself out of it, those type of things. But if you still go and do it, say still go on stage, still go into the room to go talk to, the handful of people, or just express whatever you're saying, then that's you continually being more courageous than if you just, didn't do it at all. Now,
right.
because if people don't, like, say, for the same example, right? Say they had that moment and then they froze or didn't go on stage, then that brings up feelings of like shame, or like, oh, I don't feel good enough anymore. Like, oh, you might start to second guess, like, oh, yeah, I'm not good enough. Like, dang, I should have did it, or is it too late? It's about the decisions you make when you start to feel feelings of uncertainty or
It's
anxiety.
so
Like, do
crazy
you
you
push
said that.
yourself through that, or do you shutter yourself in? So I know for
It,
myself, I used to like shutter. I'm like, oh, I would. feel so much anxiety or like feeling like I wasn't good enough, and I would shutter myself in, or just be like, oh, I'm not gonna go to that networking event. But I purposely, like during college, or college, or even now in life, I push myself to go into a new environment and just be open. And I'm like, if I'm going to a networking event and I'm like, oh my God, am I gonna be able to leave? Instead of thinking about what's gonna happen at the end of that hour, I'm like, okay, what are you gonna do when you go in? You walk into the room, okay, go ahead and get a snack, get some a water, something to drink, right? And then just say hi to a person who you end up standing by. And then the conversation's great, perfect, you did it. And then usually after that first moment, that domino effect, you're like, okay, you feel more relaxed, I'm not as tense. And I'm like, oh, I can keep doing this. Oh, and then what happens at the end of the hour? I'm like, dang, wow, I got like 4 new connections to, hopefully build relationships for whatever, what do you call it, discipline I was going there for, right? If it was like networking for real estate or networking for work or whatever the case may be. So I think it's really all about that decision that you make when you start to feel that uncertainty or that anxiety, right? If you can do it, if you can keep doing what you planned on doing, if you can continue to take that next small step, then that's awesome, and that's powerful. And then the more small steps you take, it's just going to keep getting bigger. You'll start to make that feeling of shame or anxiety or fear, whatever it is, like it will start to get smaller and like go away. And it will probably still pop up, but you at least know how to, like you said, with the thoughts, you can more easily change those thoughts instead of having a chain reaction of like things that stop you from doing what you originally sought out to do.
And to follow up on what you were saying earlier, man, about like it's how you react to it. It almost related to this quote, 10% of life is the situations you go through, and 90% is how you react to it.
Yes.
90% is how you react to it.
That.
90%, like you may go through so many situations, but it all boils down to like, how do you react? Your reaction will determine the next outcome of the next situation you may go through.
Yes.
If you react to this situation negatively, like if you go through a particular situation, right, and you react to this situation negative, the next situation might be worse, and you might even act more negative than you did before. So really, it all boils down to how you react to each and every situation you go through. That could be meaning, it could be meaning wealth issues. It could be meaning how, you might go through a situation where it's, oh man, I saved up all this money and then boom, I go broke. How do you react?
Yeah.
Do you get pissed and like, damn, I'm fucking broke? Or you try to figure out a way to get yourself out of that situation and make your situation. That's the difference between a lot of people. A lot of people complain and whine about the situations that they go through, but they got to understand that complaining isn't going to solve anything. Finding a solution is what solves problems.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, real shit. It's real shit. Like, and then understand that whatever led you to get into that particular moment was the choices you made that led up to that moment. If you went broke in your account, right? It's called your account for a reason. Your account. Your account, bro. Like, you went broke. It's because, it's just, obviously you didn't have any goddamn, you didn't budget. That's why you went broke.
Yes.
You have to follow, you got to look back on your past situations, and everybody look at every situation as a bad situation. No, these are experiences, and experiences creates a learning process. That is a learning process. But it was something you were going to say. I kind of dipped off, but I wanted to feed off of what you were saying about like how you react to it a little bit. But it just clicked in my head because it's like, it happens to everybody. Everybody goes through those wealth issues. I feel like it's a very common thing, and a lot of people react differently. Either you react by complaining or you react by finding a solution. It's only 2 routes to go. Either you surround yourself with people that are good with budgeting money, or you continue to surround yourself with people that continue to spend money. You know what I'm saying? Or if you don't have that accessibility to be around people that know how to budget money or being wealth, educate yourself to learn how to be able to budget money. Read a book. Look on YouTube. Write a list.
Yes, YouTube University.
You're right. You have the resources. Just recognize that you have the resources to get yourself better. That's it. That's all. And guess what? It comes being vulnerable to those situations, being
Yes,
vulnerable
asking
to
for
those
help when you need
options
it.
when you need it. It's being vulnerable to those options. Being vulnerability is being open to options and outcomes. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know
tough.
how to cut this out, but that was smooth as fuck. They might laugh at this. Ah, damn, that shit was smooth as hell. Damn.
Yeah.
I think you just done threw me in the motivational speaker mode. You done threw me in the let's get down to business podcast mode. All right,
Let's
so
get down to business.
I mean, you got any more comments, anything like that? You know, any statements
No,
that need to be stated?
no, I think you're good. Like, I mean, it comes down to what you're gonna do next, right? Like, okay, you're
Exactly.
feeling it. Are you gonna hold on to and this? But I will say, people are like, oh, well, if you start crying because whatever's going on, like when I feel emotions, whether it's joy, whether I feel like crying, whether I feel stressed, instead of trying to suppress it and say, no, I have to, keep working and keep doing whatever I have to do. Instead of feeling that, I prolong being in that kind of state of mind. And so what I learned to do and what I, have been doing and what I continue to do is just making sure that whatever emotions I feel it and express it for, those few minutes. I'll complain. And then what do? I go and make a decision, it's just done. Then it's done. And then I can move on and either, find that solution or, make that next decision that I need to make instead of like wallowing.
You know what? It's so crazy because I feel like, I guess, I don't know if this really is vulnerability. I think this plays a factor in vulnerability. Being open to something, like being vulnerable, being open to something is also being comfortable with whatever happens. It's being comfortable with the outcome. I think that also plays a factor. Knowing that the actions that you will place at this particular moment, you have to be completely comfortable to live it out throughout that moment. You gotta be comfortable with the outcome. If the outcome is good or bad, find a way to make it better. Find a way to be able to make the outcome fall into your way. Because it's going to be a lot of times in your life where you expect this to happen and this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Cool. That's fine. Find a different way of doing it.
But do some reflection and take some, like, you got to learn from the mistakes that happen in your life.
A mistake is going to keep happening until you learn from it. So I think that's all I got.
Yeah, this is good. This is a great conversation.
Exactly. I thought this was fire. So
yeah,
most definitely. This shit was lit. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, we kind of went in for real. But I'm gonna go ahead and just chop everything up. I usually do great questions, but I feel like most of the stuff that we done talked about, it definitely covered over those knit and grit questions. But I guess I could still throw this out there. All right, so here's the knit and grit questions. What are some deep gems that definitely touched you to a deep level out of this conversation?
Out of this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
One, I guess just like continuing to like remain being open, to new options, new possibilities. Even like keeping that openness allows you to attract something, hopefully better. Trying to attract things, you always want to attract something better, that abundance and all that stuff. So like being open and then recognizing that it's okay to feel, these type of emotions, anxiety, fear, shame, but it's really joy, happiness. You can I won't say live in those states of mind, but you'll experience those things, right? We experience a wide range of things and emotions. And it's really all about how are you gonna, if they're like one of those quote unquote negative emotions, it's like, okay, how are you gonna move forward or move past it? Like, right, how are you gonna find that solution to the problem that's making you feel that way? And then you're experiencing joy. It's like, man, how can I keep experiencing this on a daily basis? And not being afraid, don't necessarily attach yourself to the outcome of what you do, right? Sometimes even if you're just having a trusted conversation, with like one of your friends, like sharing, and you probably have that you have that level of trust, right, with that person, but you sharing, and expressing yourself, and your own opinions, trials, good news, all that stuff with someone else, right? That helps foster that love and belonging that all humans want and need. Humans need connection with at least one other person, if not the community of people. And you can find that community through all kinds of things. Your hobbies, topics that you like, yoga, to be honest, everything. So those are a few of the things that I like to keep reminding myself of.
Okay, cool. So what are some personal affirmations you tell yourself on a day-to-day basis that relate to vulnerability?
That relate to vulnerability. One thing I say is I let go of the past and I'm moving forward. I am more than enough. Just like a bunch of different things, basically just reminding myself that like I am, the leader that I am. I'm a leader that consistently builds other leaders. That's what I've been recently saying. One I've been saying is that I am a phenomenal communicator and a master of speech. Because like one thing I really want to do is really just be a great communicator and, and be on those stages and things like that, and just speaking and sharing in front of like groups of whatever the case may be, or just one-on-one with people, being able to build those solid, genuine and authentic relationships with new people that I meet and things like that. So
I guess so. This is just the start of it. This right here, this podcast is pretty much the start of it. I ain't gonna lie, it's the start of it. Then.
The start.
And so it kind of like fitting within your bracket. That's the goal that you want to head to. Honestly, well, one of your goals, so this kind of fits within that bracket. All right, the last question.
That's why I told you I put myself in situations.
Oh well, yeah.
Get me to where I want to go.
That's true.
I'm not attached to the outcome. We'll see if I rewatch it.
That's a bet.
I don't like the sound of my voice sometimes.
People on. Hey, sometimes I be feeling something. I'm like, yo, you just sound like a creep, bro. Like I be telling myself that I'm like, yo, you sound a little bit of a creep sometimes, bro. But then sometimes I be telling myself, bro, you sound sexy as hell. But then there'd be sometimes I be like, bro, you sound like you just do a rack of wild shit. Like I be telling myself that sometimes, but then at the end of the day, I'm like, look, brother, you done published it, you done threw it out into the world. You good, bro. You done ain't no point even thinking about that. If somebody is tell me that, I'll tell them, look, excuse my language, but I'll tell the motherfuckers to go suck shit. If they tell me like, yo, you sound like this, well, you can go suck it.
Yeah.
Nobody asks you for your opinion.
They don't like your voice. So
yeah, so I used to think of that for like a while. Like when I did a couple of, I'm like, damn, I really sound like that. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that when they do recordings, especially when it comes to music and shit like that too. Yeah. Be like, damn, I rap like that. That sounds weird as fuck, right? So
yeah, our own worst critic, huh?
Right. And the last and not least question, I have on the Knit and Grit questions. Would you like to be back on this podcast?
Yeah, that'd be lit.
That's a bet. We'll just make sure we set up another one in due time. So with that being said, family, make sure you show gratitude, faith, prayer, man. Gratitude every day, yo. Faith plus great work ethic creates vulnerable opportunity. Vulnerable opportunity. I had to slide that up in there. You know what I'm saying? I said that almost every end of the podcast. Faith plus great work ethic creates vulnerable opportunity. And I will catch you guys in the next episode of Common. Damn, I'm about to say Common Podcast. Common Sense Podcast, yo. Peace.
Where common sense ain't so common.
Exactly. Big fact.
Yes.